The alarm screamed through Haven's rest station at exactly 300 hours. Hyejin jumped from her bed, her heart racing as she grabbed her communicator. The message made her blood run cold. 2 Valkyrie cubs were missing. She dressed quickly and ran to the command center. The corridors were already filling with aliens of every species, all moving away from one particular section. The Valkyrie were hunting and nobody wanted to be in their path. Krath stood in the security office, his massive form barely fitting through the doorway. He was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark fur that bristled with anger and fear. His golden eyes swept across the monitors, searching for any sign of his children. Beside him, Senna paced back and forth, her claws scraping against the metal floor. She made a low growling sound that made even the bravest security officers step back. "When did you last see them?" Hyejin asked, keeping her voice calm and professional. 2 hours ago, Krath replied, his voice rough like grinding stones. They were sleeping in their nest. The door was sealed. The windows were locked. Nothing could get in. Nothing could get out. Yet they're gone, Senna snarled. Her lips pulled back to show teeth as long as human fingers. Someone took them. Someone will die for this. Hyejin understood their fear. Valkyrie cubs were precious. Their species had a low birth rate. Most couples only had 1 or 2 children in their entire lives. These cubs were barely 3 months old. They needed their parents. They needed warmth and food and protection. We'll find them, Hyejin promised. She turned to Minho, her security chief. Lock down the station. Nobody leaves. Check every room, every storage space, every maintenance tunnel. Use the thermal scanners. Minho nodded and began giving orders. Within minutes, security teams spread throughout the station. They carried scanners and weapons. They checked empty rooms and questioned every person they met. The other Valkyrie joined the search, their powerful noses sniffing at every corner. Hours passed. The search teams found nothing. The thermal scanners showed no sign of the cubs. It was as if they had simply vanished into space. Doyen knew nothing about any of this. He was in his laboratory on the far side of the station, studying samples from the planet below. He had been working for 16 hours straight. His eyes felt heavy. His back ached from bending over microscopes. He had 3 more samples to catalog, then he could sleep. The laboratory was his favorite place on the station. It was quiet here, peaceful. The walls were lined with glass containers holding plants and soil samples. Some glowed with soft blue light. Others pulsed with strange colors that didn't exist on Earth. He found them beautiful. He heard the alarm in the distance but paid no attention. Alarms went off frequently on a frontier station. Usually it was just a drill or a minor system malfunction. He had work to finish. At 0600 hours, Doyen finally completed his last sample. He stretched and yawned. His quarters were 10 minutes away, but he was too tired to make the walk. He decided to rest on the small couch in his lab for an hour or 2. He had just settled onto the couch when he heard a sound. A scratching noise. It came from the ventilation grate near the floor. Doyen sat up and listened. The sound came again. Something was in the vent. He walked over and knelt down. The grate was loose. He pulled it away and peered into the darkness. 2 pairs of golden eyes stared back at him. Doyen's breath caught in his throat. Valkyrie cubs. They were small, about the size of large house cats, covered in soft gray fur. They looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. One of them made a small crying sound. "Hey there," Doyen said softly. "It's okay. You're safe." He reached for his communicator to call security, but when he picked it up, the screen was dead. The battery had died hours ago. He had forgotten to charge it. Doyen cursed under his breath. The cubs crawled out of the vent. They moved slowly, shivering. The station kept the temperature comfortable for most species, but Valkyrie needed more heat. These little ones were cold. Doyen knew he should take them to security immediately. But they looked so frightened, so small. His instincts took over. He scooped them up gently and carried them to the couch. He sat down and held them against his chest, sharing his body warmth. The cubs stopped shivering. They pressed against him, their tiny noses sniffing at his shirt. One of them made a soft chirping sound. Doyen had never heard a Valkyrie make that noise before. It sounded almost like purring. "Your parents must be worried sick," he told them. "We need to find them. Just let me think for a minute." But the warmth was spreading through his body now. The exhaustion he had been fighting for hours came back with crushing force. His eyes began to close. He told himself he would rest for just a minute. Just 1 minute, then he would take the cubs to security. The cubs climbed higher on his chest. They seemed to find the sound of his heartbeat soothing. Their tiny claws kneaded at his shirt. One of them tucked its snout under his chin. The purring sound grew louder. Doyen's arms wrapped around them automatically, the same way a person pulls a blanket close in their sleep. His head tilted back against the couch. His breathing slowed and deepened. In the command center, Hyejin was losing hope. 8 hours had passed. Every single room on the station had been searched at least twice. The Velkari were becoming dangerous in their desperation. Krath had started interrogating other species aggressively. Senna had nearly attacked a trader who made a careless comment about the cubs. Search everything again, Hyejin ordered. Check the places we've already cleared. Maybe we missed something. Minho looked exhausted, but he nodded. He gathered his team and they began another sweep of the station. This time they would check every room personally, not just rely on the scanners. Hyejin assigned herself to check the science labs. Most of them were empty at this hour. She walked through the corridors, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She checked each room carefully, looking behind equipment and inside storage closets. When she reached Lab 7C, she expected to find it empty like the others. The door was unlocked, which was unusual. Doyen was normally very careful about security. She pushed the door open slowly. The sight that greeted her made her freeze in place. Doyen was asleep on his couch, his head tilted back and his mouth slightly open. On his chest, curled up like two small balls of fur, were the missing Velkari cubs. They were purring loudly, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each of Doyen's breaths. His arms were wrapped around them protectively, even in sleep. Hyejin stood there for a long moment, unable to move or speak. This was impossible. Velkari cubs feared everything that wasn't Velkari. They would never sleep peacefully on a human. Humans were prey species in Velkari eyes. Soft, weak, harmless. Yet here they were, completely relaxed and safe in a human's arms. Hyejin carefully raised her communicator and sent a message to Krath. Her hands shook slightly as she typed. Found them. They're safe. Lab 7C, come quietly. She moved to stand between the door and the couch, ready to protect Doyen if necessary. She had a feeling the next few minutes were going to be very interesting. Krath received the message while standing in a storage bay, pulling apart shipping containers with his bare hands. His heart lurched when he read Hyejin's words. Safe. His cubs were safe. But Lab 7C? That was the human scientist's workspace. What were his children doing there? He showed the message to Senna. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with suspicion. A human has our cubs? The message says they're safe, Krath said, but his voice was uncertain. He trusted Hyejin. She had never lied to him. But this made no sense. They ran through the corridors, followed by 6 other members of their pack. Other species scattered out of their way. The Velkari were built for speed and power. When they ran, the floor shook. Hyejin was waiting outside the lab. She held up one hand as they approached. Stop, she said quietly but firmly. Before you go in there, you need to understand something. Your cubs are perfectly fine. They're sleeping. But the situation is unusual. Where are they? Senna demanded. She tried to push past Hyejin, but the human woman stood her ground. On the human's chest, Hyejin said. They're using him like a heated pillow. I don't know how or why, but they trust him completely. Krath and Senna exchanged looks. This was impossible. Velkari cubs had strong instincts. They feared anything that wasn't pack. They would never sleep on a prey species, never let themselves be so vulnerable. We need to see, Krath said. Hyejin nodded and opened the door slowly. She put one finger to her lips, signaling for silence. The Velkari entered the lab carefully, trying to keep their claws from clicking on the floor. The sight before them stopped them all in their tracks. Doyen lay on the couch, completely asleep and defenseless. The cubs were sprawled across his chest, their small bodies rising and falling with his breathing. Their eyes were closed. Their tiny paws kneaded gently at his shirt. They made soft purring sounds that filled the quiet room. One of the cubs sensed the presence of others. Its eyes opened slowly. It saw its parents and made a happy chirping noise, but it didn't move from its position on the human's chest. Instead, it yawned, showing tiny sharp teeth, and closed its eyes again. Senna took a step forward. The movement was slight, barely a whisper of sound, but Doyen's body reacted. Even in deep sleep, his arms tightened around the cubs. His head shifted slightly, turning toward them protectively. He's guarding them, one of the pack members whispered. Even unconscious, he's protecting our young. Krath felt something strange in his chest. Confusion mixed with an emotion he couldn't name. This human was prey. Weak. Soft. His species had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons. They couldn't even see well in the dark. Yet his cubs trusted this human enough to sleep on his body, and the human's instincts were protecting them. "We should wake him," Senna said. "Take our cubs back." "Wait," Krath said. He didn't know why he said it. He just knew that something important was happening here, something that needed to be understood, not interrupted. Yejin called for chairs to be brought in. The Velkari settled down to wait, their eyes never leaving the sleeping human and cubs. More pack members arrived, drawn by curiosity and relief. Soon the lab was full of large, dangerous aliens, all watching one sleeping human with fascination. An hour passed, then another. The cubs slept peacefully. Doyen didn't wake. His breathing remained slow and steady. Occasionally he would shift slightly and the cubs would adjust their positions, but they never moved away from his warmth. Minho arrived with medical staff just in case. He took one look at the scene and shook his head. "I've been working security for 10 years, he muttered. "I've seen a lot of strange things, but this is new." Elder Vec, the oldest Velkari on the station, pushed through the crowd. He was smaller than the others, his fur gone gray with age, but everyone moved aside for him. He studied the scene carefully, his ancient eyes taking in every detail. "Remarkable," he said softly. "I have lived for 93 years. I have seen humans before, worked with them, even fought alongside some during the border conflicts. But I have never seen this. What is happening, Elder?" Krath asked. "Why don't our cubs fear him?" "I'm not certain," Vec admitted. "But I have heard old stories. Legends from before our people went to the stars. Stories about other species who could share our dens, who our young recognized as safe. I always thought they were just myths." At that moment, Doyen began to wake. His eyes moved behind their lids. His fingers twitched. One of the cubs shifted position, and its small claws pressed against his neck. Doyen's first conscious thought was that something was wrong with his blanket. It was too warm, too heavy, and it was purring. Blankets didn't purr. His eyes opened slowly. The first thing he saw was golden eyes staring down at him. The cub on his chest had its face very close to his. It chirped happily when it saw him wake. "Oh," Doyen said. His voice was rough with sleep. "Hello there." Then his brain fully woke up and he realized what he was holding. Velkari cubs, on his chest, in his arms. And there were a lot of very large, very armed Velkari standing in his laboratory staring at him. Doyen's heart began to race, but he forced himself to stay calm. Sudden movements might frighten the cubs, and frightening the cubs while surrounded by their adult relatives seemed like a very bad idea. "I can explain," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure he could. He began to sit up slowly, carefully supporting the cubs. They made protesting sounds, clearly unhappy about being disturbed. One of them licked his face with a rough tongue, and despite the tension in the room, Doyen couldn't help but smile. Senna stepped forward. Doyen gently transferred the cubs to their mother. She took them in her large paws, holding them close and sniffing at them carefully. They chirped and nuzzled against her, but their eyes kept turning back to look at Doyen. "They're not hurt," Doyen said. "Just cold, I think. They came through the ventilation system. I found them about, I don't know how long ago. A few hours? I tried to call security, but my communicator was dead. I was just keeping them warm until I could figure out what to do." "They slept on you," Krath said. It wasn't a question, but it sounded like one. "Yes," Doyen admitted. "I was tired. I fell asleep. They seemed comfortable, so I just—" He trailed off, unsure how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. Elder Vec moved closer. He looked at Doyen with an expression that might have been curiosity. "Did they struggle when you picked them up? Did they try to bite or scratch?" "No," Doyen said. "They seemed scared at first. But then they just settled down. It's like they knew I wouldn't hurt them." Vec nodded slowly as if this confirmed something. "Interesting. Very interesting indeed." The tension in the room was slowly fading. The cubs were safe. They were healthy. And despite the strangeness of the situation, no harm had been done. Krath approached Doyen. The human was sitting on the couch, looking small and tired and completely harmless. Everything Velkari knew about prey species, Yet his cubs had chosen to sleep on this human's chest in the most vulnerable position possible. "Thank you," Krath said. The words felt strange in his mouth. He didn't often thank prey species for keeping them safe. Doyen nodded, relief clear on his face. "Of course. I'm just glad they're okay." One of the cubs made a crying sound. It was reaching toward Doyen with its small paws. Senna looked down at her child, then at the human, then back at her child. Her expression was confused and slightly annoyed. "It wants to go back to you," she said to Doyen. "I don't think that's a good idea," Doyen replied quickly. "They should be with their parents. Their real parents." But the cub kept crying, and its sibling joined in. The sound was heartbreaking. Senna held them close, trying to comfort them, but they squirmed in her grip. Elder Vec laughed. It was a rough barking sound. "It seems your cubs have adopted a human, Krath. This will make for quite a story back home." The station's main conference room had never felt so crowded. Every seat was taken, and more people stood along the walls. Velkari pack members occupied one side of the room, their large forms making the furniture look like children's toys. Station personnel filled the other side. In the middle sat Doyen, looking uncomfortable with all the attention. Hyejin stood at the front of the room, trying to bring order to the chaos. Everyone was talking at once. Some wanted to know how the cubs had escaped their quarters. Others wanted to understand why they had gone to Doyen's lab specifically. A few were making jokes that weren't quite funny enough to ease the tension. "One at a time," Hyejin said firmly. "Doyen, start from the beginning. Tell us exactly what happened." Doyen took a deep breath. "I was working late in my lab. Around 0600, I think. I was about to rest when I heard scratching sounds from the ventilation grate. When I opened it, the cubs were there." "The vents," Minho said, pulling up a station map on the display screen. "The maintenance ducts run through the whole station. They're big enough for small creatures to crawl through. We should have thought of that. We sealed the quarters," Krath protested. "The door, the windows, everything. We never thought about the vents." "The cubs must have been scared," Doyen continued. "They were shivering, cold. I wanted to call security, but my communicator was dead, so I decided to keep them warm while I figured out what to do." "And then you fell asleep," Senna said. There was no anger in her voice now, just curiosity. "I didn't mean to," Doyen admitted. "I'd been working for 16 hours. I was exhausted. I sat down with them and they climbed on my chest. They started making this purring sound. It was soothing. I closed my eyes for just a second, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up with everyone staring at me." Jiho, a young human engineer, raised his hand. "Can I ask something? Why did the cubs trust you? I mean, no offense, but aren't Velkari cubs supposed to be afraid of other species?" All eyes turned to the Velkari side of the room. Krath and Senna looked at Elder Vec. The old Velkari stood slowly, leaning on his walking staff. "That," Vec said, "is the question that matters. Young human, you are correct. Our cubs are born with strong instincts. They fear anything that is not Velkari. This keeps them safe. They should not trust prey species. They should especially not sleep peacefully on one." "Yet they did," Krath said. "Yet they did," Vec agreed. He moved to the center of the room, his old eyes studying Doyen carefully. "I would like to try something. May I approach you?" Doyen nodded, looking nervous. Vec walked up to him and leaned close, sniffing carefully. The old Velkari's nose twitched. He stepped back, his expression thoughtful. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting indeed. What?" Doyen asked. "What do you smell?" "Many things," Vec said. "The plants from your laboratory, the coffee you drink too much of, the soap you use. But beneath all that, there is something else, a scent that our people recognize on an instinctual level." "What kind of scent?" Hyejin asked. Vec turned to address the entire room. "Our people have been studying other species for many generations. We have learned about biology and chemistry and all the sciences. But we have forgotten some of the old knowledge. Knowledge from before we reached the stars." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Long ago, my ancestors lived in caves and forests. Winters were harsh. Food was scarce. Sometimes a family would lose their parents. The cubs would be alone, cold dying, but sometimes they survived. The old stories say that other creatures would help them, other predators who shared the same instincts, who recognized helpless young and felt the need to protect them." "You're saying humans have some kind of biological marker?" Minho asked. "Something that makes Velkari cubs think we're safe?" More than that, Vex said. Humans have something we call the caretaking signature. It's a combination of things. The rhythm of your heartbeat, the warmth of your body, and yes, a particular scent that you produce when you feel protective. Doyen looked down at his hands. I was worried about them. When I found them, I just wanted to keep them safe. And they knew, Vex said. Your body told them what your words could not. To those cubs, you didn't smell like prey. You smelled like someone who would protect them. Like Pac, the room fell silent. The implications were enormous. Humans and Velkari had coexisted for decades, but always at a distance. The Velkari saw humans as weak, unsuited for the harsh realities of frontier life. Humans saw Velkari as dangerous, unpredictable, violent. But if Velkari cubs could recognize humans as safe, as family, what did that mean for both species? Senna spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Our cubs have been restless today. They keep crying. We've tried everything, but they won't settle. They want the human, one of the pack members said. It sounded like an accusation. I'm sorry, Doyen said quickly. I didn't mean to confuse them. I was just trying to help. Krath held up one large paw for silence. He looked at his mate and something passed between them. A silent conversation that only they could understand. Finally, Senna nodded. We would like to make a request, Krath said, turning to Doyen. It is unusual, perhaps offensive, but we ask anyway. What is it? Doyen asked. Would you visit our quarters? Krath continued. Spend time with our cubs? Help them understand that you are still here, still safe? It might ease their distress. The request shocked everyone. Velkari never invited outsiders to their private spaces. Their quarters were sacred, family-only zones. For Krath to make this offer meant something significant. Doyen looked uncertain. I don't want to intrude. And I don't know anything about taking care of Velkari cubs. You know more than you think, Vex said gently. Your instincts guided you well last night. Trust them again. Will it help? Doyen asked. Will it make the cubs feel better? Yes, Senna said. I believe it will. Doyen stood up. He was so much smaller than the Velkari around him. He had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. He looked fragile and breakable. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. Then I'll do it. If you think it will help. Krath stepped forward. In one smooth motion, he pressed his forehead against Doyen's. The gesture lasted only a moment, but its meaning was clear. It was a sign of respect, of trust, of something that might become friendship. Thank you, Krath said. The meeting dispersed slowly. People left in small groups talking quietly among themselves. The story would spread through the station quickly. By evening, everyone would know about the human who had earned a Velkari pack leader's respect. Hyejin pulled Doyen aside as he was leaving. Are you sure about this? You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. I know, Doyen said, but those cubs need help. And if I can provide it, I should. You're a good person, Hyejin told him. Just be careful. Velkari are still predators. Don't forget that. I won't, Doyen promised. But as he walked toward the Velkari quarters with Krath and Senna, he felt no fear. Only curiosity and a strange sense of rightness. The cubs needed him. He didn't fully understand why, but he understood enough. Sometimes family wasn't about species or biology. Sometimes it was about who showed up when you needed them, who kept you warm when you were cold, who held you safe when you were scared. The cubs had needed someone, and he had been there. Now he would continue to be there, for as long as they needed him. When they arrived at the Velkari quarters, the cubs were crying. But the moment Doyen entered, they stopped. Their heads turned toward him. They made happy chirping sounds and scrambled across the floor toward him. Doyen knelt down and let them climb into his arms. They nuzzled against his chest, seeking the heartbeat they had learned to trust. And as he held them, Doyen realized that something had changed. Not just for the cubs, but for him too. He had found something he didn't know he was looking for. A connection that crossed species and defied logic. A purpose that felt right in a way nothing else had. He had found Pac. 3 weeks had passed since the incident in Doyen's laboratory. In that time, the entire dynamic of Haven's rest station had shifted in small but noticeable ways. Doyen visited the Velkari quarters every day now. Sometimes twice a day. The cubs had come to expect him. When he arrived, they would scramble to greet him, chirping and climbing on his legs until he sat down and let them settle on his lap. Krath and Senna watched these interactions with a mixture of amazement and acceptance. They learn faster when you're here. Senna admitted one afternoon. She was teaching the cubs to hunt, using a small toy that she dragged across the floor. The cubs would normally lose interest after a few minutes, but with Doyen watching and encouraging them, they stayed focused. "I'm not doing anything special," Doyen said. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, one cub using his knee as a launching pad to pounce on the toy. "You're being present," Krath said. "That matters more than you know." The visits had become routine, but they had also become something more. Doyen found himself looking forward to them. The cubs made him laugh with their clumsy attempts at being fierce. Senna had started teaching him basic Velkari words for common things. Krath discussed station business with him, asking for his perspective on issues involving both species. He was becoming part of their pack, though nobody had officially said so. The change wasn't limited to one family. Other Velkari on the station had started approaching humans differently. Not with suspicion or dismissal, but with curiosity. They asked questions. They observed. Some even started eating in the common dining area instead of isolating themselves. Yuna, Doyen's younger sister, noticed it in her classroom. She taught children of various species, including 3 young Velkari who had always kept to themselves. Now they were joining group activities, playing with human children, learning together. "Something's changed," Yuna told her brother over lunch one day. "The Velkari students used to ignore everyone else. Now they're participating, sharing. One of them even asked a human child for help with math yesterday." "That's good, right?" Doyen asked. "It's amazing," Yuna said, "but it's also a little scary. If this goes wrong, if something happens to damage this new trust, the backlash could be bad." She was right to be concerned. Not everyone was happy about the changes. Some humans thought the Velkari were dangerous and should be kept at a distance. Some Velkari thought their people were becoming too soft, too trusting of prey species. The real test came when a message arrived from the Velkari homeworld. Packmaster Vel was coming to the station. He wanted to investigate the situation personally. "Who is Packmaster Vel?" Doyen asked when Krath told him the news. "He leads the Grand Council," Krath explained. "He's responsible for all Velkari interests in this sector of space. His word is law. Will he be angry?" Doyen wondered. "I don't know," Krath admitted. "Vel is traditional. He believes in the old ways. Our people should be strong, independent, fierce. What's happening here challenges those beliefs." Packmaster Vel arrived 3 days later. He was older than Krath, but not as old as Elder Vec. His fur was dark with streaks of silver. His eyes were sharp and calculating. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. Hyejin greeted him formally and offered him the station's best quarters. Vel accepted with minimal courtesy. He had not come for comfort. He had come for answers. The next morning, Vel demanded a meeting with Krath, Senna, and the human who had somehow gained his people's trust. Doyen arrived to find the Packmaster studying him like a specimen in a laboratory. "So," Vel said, his voice deep and commanding, "you are the prey who thinks he's Pack?" "I don't think anything," Doyen replied calmly. "I just help when I can." "Help?" Vel repeated. "That's an interesting word. Tell me what you think these cubs need. What can you provide that their own parents cannot?" It was a trap. Doyen could hear it in the question. If he claimed to be better than Krath and Senna, he would insult them. If he claimed to provide nothing, Vel would question why he was there at all. "I don't provide anything their parents can't," Doyen said carefully, "but I provide something different. Another perspective. Another source of comfort. Children benefit from having multiple caregivers. It's true for humans. Maybe it's true for Velkari too." Vel's eyes narrowed. "Our cubs need strength. They need to learn to be warriors. To hunt, to fight. What can you teach them about any of that?" "Nothing," Doyen admitted. "But they're 3 months old. Right now they need to feel safe. They need to explore and play and learn that the world has good things in it. The warrior training can come later. You presume to know what our young need." "No," Doyen said. "I'm just saying what I've observed. Your cubs are happy. They're learning. They're healthy. If my presence helps with that, then it's good. If it doesn't, then I'll stop visiting." Vel stood abruptly. "Show me." They went to Krath's quarters. The cubs were playing with a puzzle toy that Jiho had made for them. When Doyen entered, they abandoned the toy immediately and ran to him. They climbed up his legs, chirping excitedly. Doyen laughed and picked them up, settling them in his arms. Val watched this with an unreadable expression. Then he did something unexpected. He walked up to Doyen and sniffed carefully, just as Elder Vec had done weeks before. "I smell it," Val said quietly. "The caretaking signature. It's strong on you. Is that bad?" Doyen asked. "It's unusual," Val replied. He turned to Krath and Senna. "Your cubs are bonding with this human. You understand what that means?" "We do," Krath said. "In our old traditions, when a cub bonds with someone outside their birth pack, that person becomes family. They take on responsibilities, obligations. It's not a casual thing." "I understand," Doyen said, though he wasn't entirely sure he did. Vel studied him for a long moment. Then he made a decision. "I want to see how other humans interact with our young. If this is truly something your species can do naturally, it should not be limited to one individual." Over the next week, Vel observed humans throughout the station. He watched Yuna teaching Velkari children alongside human ones. He saw Minho helping a young Velkari who had gotten separated from his family group. He observed Jiho fixing a toy for a Velkari cub who had broken it. In every case, the humans showed the same instincts: patience, gentleness, a desire to help. The Velkari young responded positively, showing none of the fear or aggression they typically displayed around other species. Vel also interviewed the humans. He asked about their families, their upbringing, their beliefs about children. He discovered that humans had a concept they called "it takes a village," the idea that raising young was a community responsibility, not just a parent's duty. "Your species prioritizes the care of young," Vel said to Hyejin during one conversation. "Even young that are not your own?" "Yes," Hyejin agreed. "We believe children are precious. All children, regardless of whose they are." "My people believe the same," Vel said. "But we show it differently. We thought strength was the only way to keep our young safe. We didn't consider that gentleness could be a strength too." On his last day at the station, Vel called for a formal gathering. Both humans and Velkari filled the common area. Everyone was curious about what the Packmaster would say. Vel stood at the front of the room, commanding attention without effort. "I came here believing that my people were making a mistake, that we were becoming weak by associating too closely with humans. I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A Packmaster admitting error was almost unheard of. "I have observed something remarkable here," Vel continued. "Two species learning to understand each other, not through treaties or trade agreements, but through something more fundamental, through care for each other's young." He gestured to Doyen, who was standing near the back with one of Krath's cubs in his arms. "This human has shown us something we had forgotten. That strength comes in many forms. That caring for the vulnerable is not weakness but wisdom." Vel turned to Krath. "I am formally recognizing the bond between your family and this human. Let it be recorded that Doyen is pack friend to your house. He has rights and responsibilities according to our oldest traditions." Krath pressed his forehead to Vel's in acknowledgement. Then he turned and did the same to Doyen. The gesture was witnessed by everyone present. It was official now. Binding. As the gathering dispersed, Elder Vec approached Doyen with a smile. "You have made history today, young human. You are the first of your species to be recognized as Velkari Pack." "I still don't fully understand what that means," Doyen admitted. "It means you are family," Vec said simply. "Everything else will become clear with time." 6 months had transformed Haven's rest station in ways nobody could have predicted. The image of Doyen sleeping with the Velkari cubs had spread across the galaxy. News organizations had picked up the story. Scientists had written papers about it. Diplomats had started discussions about what it meant for interspecies relations. But on the station itself, life had simply moved forward. The extraordinary had become ordinary. Doyen's quarters were different now. They were connected to Krath's family space through a newly installed doorway. The cubs could move freely between both areas. They spent their nights with their parents, learning to be Velkari. But during the day, they often came to Doyen's side, especially when they were tired or upset. "They see you as a comfort provider," Senna had explained, "like a trusted uncle or grandparent in human terms. You give them security in a different way than we do." Doyen had learned to accept this role. He had even learned some Velkari parenting techniques, how to discipline without breaking their spirit, how to encourage their natural hunting instincts through play, how to read their body language when they were scared or sick. The cubs were growing fast. They were almost a year old now, about the size of large dogs. Their baby fur had given way to sleeker adult coats. They were starting to show their personalities. One was bold and curious, always getting into trouble. The other was thoughtful and careful, watching before acting. Krath had started teaching them to fight. Real fighting, not just play. Doyen watched these lessons with fascination and a little concern. The cubs were so small, but already their claws were sharp and their reflexes were quick. "Don't worry," Krath said, noticing Doyen's expression. "They need to know how to defend themselves." "The galaxy is not always kind." "I know," Doyen said. "It's just hard to watch sometimes." "Because you want to protect them from everything," Senna said. She was watching her cubs practice their pouncing technique. "That's your nature. But they need to learn strength too. It's about balance, balance." That word had become important to everyone on the station. Balance between strength and gentleness, between independence and community, between tradition and change. Other Velkari families had started forming connections with humans. Not formal pack bonds like Doyen's, but friendships, partnerships. A Velkari engineer named Ren had started working closely with Jiho. They had designed a new environmental system together that worked better for both species. In Yuna's classroom, the changes were even more visible. Human and Velkari children played together naturally now. They had formed mixed groups, learning from each other. The Velkari children taught hunting games. The human children taught cooperation games. Together, they created something new. "They don't see each other as different species," Yuna told her brother. "To them, they're just friends who look different." "I wish adults could be more like that." "Maybe they can be," Doyen said. "It just takes time." But not everyone was happy with the changes. A human merchant named Taewan had been caught trying to smuggle restricted weapons to a separatist group. When questioned, he claimed that the Velkari presence on the station had become too strong, too influential. "They're predators," Taewan had shouted during his arrest. "They're dangerous. We're making a mistake by trusting them." The incident had created tension. Some humans agreed with Taewan. Some Velkari saw it as proof that humans couldn't be trusted after all. The fragile peace that had been building seemed ready to shatter. Yejin called an emergency meeting. The station's main gathering space was packed. Humans stood on one side, Velkari on the other. The division was clear and troubling. "We can't let one person's actions destroy what we've built here," Yejin said. Taewan broke the law. He's being dealt with according to station regulations. His views are his own, not representative of all humans. But some humans agree with him, a Velkari warrior named Dek said. "We hear the whispers. We see the fear in their eyes." "And some Velkari still call humans weak and useless," Minho countered. "Fear and prejudice exist on both sides." The argument was escalating when Doyun stood up. He had one of Krath's cubs with him, the curious one who liked to follow him everywhere. The cub was almost too big to carry now, but Doyen still managed. "Can I say something?" Doyen asked. The room fell quiet. Everyone knew Doyun's story. Everyone had seen the images of him sleeping with the cubs. He had become a symbol of something important, though he had never asked for that role. 6 months ago, I woke up with these cubs on my chest, Doyen began. I didn't plan it. I didn't try to make a statement. I just helped 2 scared children who needed warmth and safety. He looked around the room, meeting both human and Velkari eyes. Since then, I've learned a lot. I've learned that Velkari cubs purr when they're happy. I've learned that Velkari parents worry just as much as human parents do. I've learned that Krath tells really bad jokes when he's trying to make someone feel better. A few people laughed. Krath looked embarrassed. But I've also learned that change is scary for everyone, Doyen continued. Humans are scared that Velkari are too strong, too dangerous. Velkari are scared that humans are making them soft, making them weak. Both fears come from the same place. We're afraid of losing who we are. He put the cub down. It immediately went to its father, but kept looking back at Doyen. Here's what I know for certain. These cubs don't care about any of that. They don't care that I'm prey and they're predators. They don't care that my species is different from theirs. They just know that I'm safe, that I care about them, that I'm family. Children don't understand the real world, someone in the crowd said. Maybe they understand it better than we do. Yuna spoke up. She had several Velkari children with her, students from her class. These kids have shown us that differences don't have to divide us, that we can learn from each other. That family doesn't have to look the same. Elder Vec stood slowly, leaning on his staff. I am old, he said. I have seen many things in my long life. Wars, treaties, alliances made and broken. And I tell you this with certainty. What is happening here on this station is more important than any treaty I've ever witnessed. He moved to the center of the room, standing between the two groups. My people have always been proud of our strength, our independence. We thought we needed nothing from anyone, but these humans have shown us something we were missing, not weakness but completion. They have strengths where we have weaknesses. We have strengths where they have weaknesses. Together we are more than we are apart. Packmaster Vel's voice came through a communication channel. He was calling in from the homeworld. I am listening to this discussion. I want everyone to know that the Grand Council supports what is happening on Haven's Rest. We are officially proposing a new program. Velkari families who wish to form pack bonds with human families will be supported and encouraged. The announcement shocked everyone. The Grand Council was endorsing this, making it official? We have been a closed society for too long, Vel continued. We have seen other species as lesser, as threats, or as irrelevant. But the truth is the galaxy is changing. Those who cannot adapt will be left behind. Those who learn to build bridges will thrive. A human voice joined the transmission. It was Suman, a diplomat from Earth's colonial authority. Earth's government agrees. We are proposing a formal cultural exchange program. Human families can volunteer to live alongside Velkari families, learn from each other, build genuine connections. This is happening too fast, someone protested. We need time to think about this. We've had 6 months to think, Hijin said. And in that time, I've watched this station become stronger, safer, and more united than it ever was before. Yes, there are still problems. Yes, some people are uncomfortable. But that's true of any real change. The discussion continued for hours. People voiced their concerns, their hopes, their fears. Not everyone was convinced. Not everyone was comfortable. But slowly a consensus formed. They would try. They would give this new alliance a chance. First exchange families arrived. 5 human families and 5 Velkari families, all volunteers. They were given connected quarters like Doyun and Krath had. They were given support and training. They were told to be patient with each other and themselves. Some struggled. One human family requested a transfer after a month, saying it was too difficult. One Velkari family did the same. But the others stayed. They learned. They adapted. They grew. Doyun watched it all with a sense of wonder. He had never meant to start a movement. He had just wanted to keep 2 scared cubs warm. But sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences. On the 1-year anniversary of that night in his laboratory, Doyun hosted a gathering in his quarters. Krath and Senna were there with their cubs, who were now gangly teenagers testing their parents' patience. Hijin and Minho came. Yuna brought several of her students, both human and Velkari. Jiho and his new Velkari partner Ren showed up with some kind of experimental device that probably violated safety regulations. Elder Vec told stories about the old days, when Velkari had lived in caves and forests. The cubs listened with wide eyes, imagining a world so different from the metal corridors of the station. At one point, the curious cub, now Almohand for attention. Doyun scratched behind the young Velkari's ears, making him purr contentedly. You know, Krath said, watching this interaction. I never.